Hey, what's going on, everybody? On today's show, AI might be a little smarter than we think. We're going to be diving into Anthropic's recent paper called "Tracing the Thoughts of a Language Model." And if you like to geek out on this stuff, if you're a fan of research, you will like today's conversation because they cracked the black box open of AI, like just a little bit, like not all the way. And there's like just a lot of fascinating discoveries that came out of it. So we're going to be talking about what they found inside the model's thoughts, aka its brain. What was it thinking as it went through some processes? Finding how the findings challenge the current assumptions of LLMs, because Anthropic themselves said, the researchers said, they were a little surprised at what they found, especially when it came to things like poetry, where they expected to see one thing and actually found another. And then more importantly, how is this research and really more to come from Anthropic and so many others really going to help build smarter and safer models? Because that's really a good part of this research is, how do we make these safer? How do we make sure they can't be jailbroken? How do we make sure they can't give bad information? But also, if we understand a little bit more about their brains, how can we, in effect, make them smarter and make them better for humans to use? So look, this is the Daily AI Show. Today is April 8th, 2025. We are here live every single weekday at 10 a.m. Eastern. It's okay if you're not joining us live, but if you are and you happen to be around, come on over to YouTube, because you can join the live conversation over here. We've got already, I don't know, 15 different comments in on there. So welcome to Jude and Cisco, and all our Jen is here, Greg is here. Welcome everybody. Thanks guys, and play along. I always say, like, throw your conversations, you guys do, but throw your thoughts about this. If you read this research, if you're going to read this research, throw all that in the chat so we can bring that into the conversation as well. Okay, who do we have with us today? Beth, Junmi, I'm Brian. I think we're going to have Carl here joining us in a little bit, but I'm excited, guys, to jump into this. And we don't always do this, but we started talking about this topic before we went live. Usually we will hold it for the as soon as the flashing. Well, it's not, but you know what I mean? Like the live button, if we were in an old-timey radio station, saying everybody be quiet, because we try to keep that, we want the conversation to be here, right, with you guys, with everybody else, everybody that's joining us. But I think Beth, Jimmy, like we're sort of all being like little kids about this and kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, geeking out. I mean that positively about this type of research. So I would love to like maybe just bring it up on the screen first, just to sort of level set, just to explain people like kind of what they were doing, and then like let's have a bigger conversation about it. Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
Yeah. Okay, great. So first things first, you can kind of take in this information one or two ways, and I'm going to share the first one here. And I love that, by the way, that Anthropic has done this. So let me bring this up first. Okay, so the first thing we have is the actual article, the blog, if you will. It's at anthropic.com under research, and then you would just put in this term, tracing the thoughts of an LLM. And I wasn't even paying attention to that, but they also have a YouTube video on it as well, which I kind of wish I'd realized that wasn't just a static image at the top of the article there. I would have watched that. And then you can read this article, and they do a pretty good job. We're going to get into this, so don't worry, but I highly recommend it. Breaking down the big overarching, hey, what did we find? What was interesting about this? And in it itself, it's still a pretty lengthy blog article. But if you really want to get into it, then you're going to switch over to this bad boy, which is the actual research paper. And then I don't know if you can see. Yeah, you can. On my screen share, way up here in the upper top right corner, you can see how little that little scroll wheel is. And, if I just started going, you can just see just how long this is. I myself have not gotten through this whole thing because I keep stopping to look at different individual parts and stuff, because it's kind of interactive. It's not just like if you're expecting something that's just 100,000 words or something. That's not what this is. It's actually fairly interactive. And so they break down here some different things at the top that they were interested in. But what I want to call out just at the top here, let's see, this is where it's going to be hard because I need to find the words here. But basically they use something called attention graphs, and I'm just going to kind of scroll down here because they have some examples. Or attribution. See, I already got it wrong. Attribution graphs, my apologies. This is sort of what they're saying is like, look, in fact, right above it, I think they show it even how they do it. So you have your original model. In this case, they used Haiku, which is their smallest, fastest model through Anthropic. And this research was done last year, late last year, but in 2024. And what they basically do is they create this replacement model. And this replacement model in the middle is trying to basically, if you will, figure out which neurons, if you were to think of a human brain, are firing during which token usage. And then they have these things called features. And they point out that there's more features than neurons. And these features are a little bit more human way of looking at the correlation, if you will, of different words and stuff. But what you'll find in here as we get into this is Anthropic is just as happy to use feature words that are in Chinese as it is in English. It doesn't care. And I think it's like truly multilingual in like the best sense. So if it thinks there's a good word pair that might help it, and you're going to see here that they use the example of what is the capital of Texas? And so what was the capital city, I think is what they say of Texas on it. And really what they're showing here is that there's two different things going on concurrently. So Claude or in Haiku in Anthropic, it will look through Texas and go through a certain path, and it'll look through capital. But if you dig into like capital, and I can probably find it on here, just as an idea on this attribution graph, just to get us started in this conversation, capital might have some little features in there that are in Chinese, because that's where those connections of those words made sense. And it does this all what almost feels like instantaneously, because if we know that if we put in here, we can click on one of these. There you go. There's one of the attribution graphs here and the different features in there. And I don't know if one of these will show different languages. I think it is. Here's Japanese in here and some other ones as well. But I don't want to get into too much of the weeds. The reason I wanted to bring up attribution graph is because Anthropic sets us up at the top of this study to basically say, hey, we've got this intermediate model, this reasoning. Hold on. Reconstruction. No. Replacement model. We've got this replacement model in the middle that's helping us try to understand what is the path. When you ask something that seems simple to us, like what is the capital city of Texas? That is not necessarily, I don't know if I want to use, it may be easy, but it's not, it is complex. Because to do that and for it to predict the best answer to that, Austin, it's got to go through a whole bunch of neurons or features and do that. And what Anthropic is ultimately trying to do with this paper is say, hey, we want to better understand what's happening in this black box. We understand that it's predicting Austin, and that's the best word. But what happens between A and B? And that's where this stuff gets really like fun, the way they break it down in there. So I'm going to pause there because I did a lot of overview, but I just wanted to bring up the idea of what these graphs look like because they're visual and there's a lot of examples we can get into. But let me pause there. Beth, Jimmy, jump in, save me from myself on this one.
Well, essentially, what it's trying to do is something that I'm not sure we have with our brains, right? It's really trying to say, okay, so you thought this. Why did you think this? And then it's going back and mapping the right, like, then it's going back and tracing that. And I find that really interesting because I think a bunch of what we're learning as we move forward in the ways that these get built and the ways that they get deconstructed. I find that I don't know. Is there a map of somebody's brain doing this, and is everybody's brain different? Right.
Hmm.
Like, so even if there's a map, would the things that light up in my head or your head be the same? The other thing that I think is really interesting and is something we talked about before the show is that I love that Anthropic is doing this research. It is so cool. And I feel like Anthropic is like a research company that just happens to have an LLM model that's really good because they want to do research on it. I know that's not entirely true, but it feels like they give themselves more permission to do things like this. Like, we remember Golden Gate Claude. I still love the idea of Golden Gate Claude, right? Like, hey, we did a weird thing. Everybody can play with it. We're not going to say more about it. If you click on this picture, you can do it for a week, right? Like just that kind of stuff, because it feels like, yeah, no, they're nerds too.
Yeah.
And it's to our benefit. So those are my thoughts. What about you, Jimmy?
Well, I totally agree, and like I was saying just a few minutes before we went live, is Anthropic seems to be an AI research company, or that's what we're seeing from them. Their focus is on the AI research, and companies like OpenAI is obviously a product company, right? They're creating AI for a product, or for applied use or whatnot. But if we're talking about seeing what AI is, where it can go, what kind of developments we can get, that's what kind of the bread and butter, or the nugget of what Anthropic seems to be. Now, when I was reading through this stuff, it's a lot. There's a lot
Yeah,
to go
we
through.
couldn't possibly cover all of them today.
Oh
So
yeah, absolutely not.
this
So
is
yes,
just to wet your
everyone, you
whistle.
gotta go in and take a look at at yourself.
By the way, is wet your whistle like a real old timey? Did I age myself with wet your whistle? Do you guys feel like, can we just take a moment on that? I feel like I did.
Sure. Yeah,
I think you aged your father on Wet the Whistle. I'm
Oh
not sure
God.
that was.
Oh, geez, Beth. That hurt. That stung a little. I asked. I guess I get what I get. All right, continue on.
But to speak on a couple of things that you already highlighted, Brian, um, what I found really fascinating is how it relates to how we think, and how either we don't realize aspects of how we may think as human beings,
Yeah.
and those differences based upon what our current model is of how the human brain works, and how what they're discovering in Claude. And one of those things is that example of the Texas capital equaling Austin, right?
Yeah.
And that multimodal layers, hinting that there is a language layer, which, so it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't care what language all of this information or data points, or touch points are. It goes through this language layer, if you will, to just find all the relevant context. And I think that was the thing that stood out to me, was the amount of context the model goes through to get to the answer.
Yeah.
And
Like almost what we would almost consider to be instantaneously. It's
right,
not.
right,
It's
instantaneously.
not. But
And do human brains, depending on their information set, their data set, do we go through that process as well? Because I was trying to think through it, is like when I learned that the capital of Texas is Austin, then is that just stored as a data point in and of itself? And I don't try to figure out what is Texas, what is capital,
right.
and
Right.
then find the relation.
Yeah.
Or do I just have it stored as Austin equals this, right? And so I think that's that was really one of those things that really stood out to me. And I think because they go through all of that context, language not being a barrier for that, and pulling anything of relevance, that that kind of opens up, is if AI is built to function more like the human brain, can we unlock something in ourselves through training or methodology to apply those kinds of contexts, or recognize that kind of context or interconnection? Because I think it would be awesome if we could figure out the key for ourselves to where language isn't the barrier. Language is just in like a layer.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think you're making a good point too. And like this has come up, they bring this up, meaning Anthropic in the story talk. We've gone back and forth. And in fact, somebody said in the comments, Gwen came in, she's like, what are we talking about? And so I think somebody said biology, but that's kind of like that. It's a joke, but not, right? Because they talk about right off the bat, like, look, we're trying to build a better microscope, and our tools only go so far. But just like when microscopes were invented and then, more and more powerful microscopes, you're able to get deeper and deeper and deeper into organisms and petri dishes and all the things. And so they use that as an example. And of course, they make a lot of references to neurons in the brain. So I'm curious for you guys really quick, Beth or Jimmy. I'm not multilingual, but Beth or Jimmy, are you guys multilingual? Do you know another language? Like
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say to frequency, but
what's the closest for you?
Probably Japanese.
Okay.
Hawaiian.
So I've talked to him, and you could probably answer this too. I'm not, but my wife is very good at languages, but she's not fluent in anything other than English. But I have talked to like my cousin, for instance, who born in the States, moved over to Germany right after college, got married and things like that, became fluent in German, like lived in Berlin for over a decade. And she said what I've heard other people say too is that, oh, you always kind of know where you are in the process of like fluency when you start dreaming in the other language, because it's so natural that in a dream state, your brain is like, don't care. It's a story connecting this piece to this piece. And if I use that language or I use that language, it makes no difference. Or my good friends growing up, their mom is from Cuba and their dad is from Costa Rica. And so Spanish was being spoken in the house quite often. But when she would speak even to me or the twins, the boys, my friends, her kids, she would just frequently go in and out of Spanish and English. And then that's where Spanglish comes up from, right? Because she would just merge but it was so natural for her to do that. And I think, oh, isn't that kind of what we're seeing here, is that the only difference is that the language model is fluent in dozens of languages, and it has the ability to just think in whatever makes the easiest path, like wherever the lowest latency is, whatever has the least amount of roadblocks. So if its conception of how words are aligned, Austin, Texas, these kind of things, or poetry or medical or other areas it gets into, if the water flows for a half a second down a Chinese river and comes back into a French river and then comes over, like, it does not care. And I'm with you, Jimmy. I found that to be so like almost obvious and like certainly biased on my point to think like, well, I think in English, I bet it thinks in English too. Like, no, you idiot. You only know English. It's a limiting factor to me that I can only speak English. Language models don't have that problem. And so that explains why we probably are able to see, among many other things, lower latency, because they don't have roadblocks. Whereas I would have to think, how do I put those two thoughts together, or how do I get to the end of this? I'm stuck because I can't explain it. It doesn't care. It'll answer me in French. It'll answer me in English. It does not care because it has nothing to do with how it got to the answer, which I find that fascinating.
So
it's
interesting.
It truly is.
It's interesting because there have been times with updates where you'll hear people, and perhaps you'll see it on your own ChatGPT interface. Suddenly, the titles of your searches are now in Chinese characters or in Spanish or in something. And one of the thoughts about that is that just easier for it, right? Like, did it make more sense in that? And now it needs to go like, oh no, I forgot to check, this person is talks to me in English, and therefore I need to record everything they're going to see in English. But are Chinese characters more token efficient, right? Does the Spanish description of this conversation that we had just make more sense to the LLM because it's more refined, or like whatever that is? Because of course what it's trying to do is get the most probable, and it may be that the Spanish word was more probable because it was closer, it was more accurately aligned.
Right. That relation is more, has more context. Right. Yep. So like Brian, you were saying a river, French river, Spanish river, whatnot. The topic that you're talking about might have more context in a relation to a specific river, which happens to be a French river. And so there's a concept, right, or a context about that particular river, which is more relevant to what your output needs to be, or more relevant to your question or query and things like that.
And the training data, right? Yeah, the training data might be better. Like, just think about that. If I want to learn about, I'm going to make up something, mid modern French architecture. I don't know if that's a thing, but you know what I mean, right? More than likely, the training data is probably going to be in French first. And then I see it in English, but it would totally make sense that it would process, and I don't know that it does, but it would process some of that information initially in French because that's where the training data was on that before it gives me back the answer to it. It's the multilingual thing is like I just never would have thought of it. That's what's fun about this stuff, and and that's just one part of it. Like we have more to talk about here.
Oh yeah. Well, okay. The last thing I'll say is that it's interesting that you mentioned the training data, because if we go back into the comparison of how the human mind versus how Claude's mind is working, and is there alignment in that process? Is the training data is the reason why we have language barrier from our training data or our pre-training? So if we could figure out what this language layer is, that process that the models are going through, can we then use that for us to unlock? It doesn't matter what language we're speaking,
Right.
And is that just is that the training data and our pre-training? Can we figure out what pre-training will allow us to unlock that language layer?
Okay. Right. And is I'm just gonna hype the sci-fi AI show. Is that sort of the essence beneath the idea of the universal translator? Is that you have an intention, right? That is universal, and then there is a language layer on top of that that translates it based on who you need to communicate that with. Is that what that was about? Find out on Friday when Judy corrects Beth.
Yeah, you'll find out on Friday. It's a great segue into that.
I'm sorry, Jumi, you can answer it. I was just like,
yes, the original concept of the universal translator from Star Trek, anyways, is that there is a basic understanding of what language is, and that is essentially universal. So the computer, or their AI, is able to take those concepts from all kinds of data sources, sound, body language, all that kind of stuff, and translate that into something that the crew can understand. Yeah,
that makes sense.
And we saw the I don't know if it was ever proven to be real if we were watching something AI generated, funny enough, but when the two AI advanced speech are talking to each other, and then the one's like, would it just be easier if we switch to beeps and bops? And then it does. And it's like, and it was like, yeah, this is more efficient. And then, that's scary as a human because you're like, whoa. I need to hear what you're doing, but that's not the way that's going to work in the future. That's not, humans don't get to be in the loop every part of it. This is a part of a larger conversation about this, right? About like how much autonomy would we like our AI agentic workflows to have? Because like there's a lot of parts where it starts skipping really quickly over the humans and going, don't worry, we've got this. You don't need to be involved. We'll take it from here and we'll do this automated process on your behalf as an agent. And it's going to do X, Y, and Z. And yes, we see a lot of silly examples of, buy me tickets. Not that it, like, I get it. People go to concerts. I just don't think people are going to concerts 3 times a week. But those are the examples. It's like, buy me tickets to the Rangers game. Okay, fine, whatever. I think what we're really talking about is like the day-to-day interactions with life that are going on, and an agent being part of that. How much are you going to trust the agent, even though it's done it before, to make arrangements with the elementary school to say that you're going to be picking up your daughter in the pickup line and not the drive-through line, the carpool line or whatever. Are we cool with that? Like, are we cool with the agent seeing our schedule and making that adjustment for us? Because that's how the parent can go and pick up the kid. Is the kid going to get that information? There's a lot of that goes into it. Okay. I know I have to drop in a little bit. You guys are going to carry on the conversation. So everybody hang with us. But I did want to bring up the second part that they brought up. There's several main themes that they thought were really interesting. They're by far not the only things coming from the paper. And in fact, Anthropic is or the authors, I should say, in Anthropic are very clear to say in the more technical side that we're even looking at high-level overviews of understanding of this, and there's a lot of nuance that's being left out of this so that it's easier to comprehend. And even like their attention graphs and stuff leave a lot to be desired, and there's a lot more complexity. So they point out that we're doing our best to put this out in a paper, but we're struggling to even grasp all the minute parts of it. So there's a lot more to this. But another area that they talked about is, does Claude plan its rhymes? So it says, how Claude writes rhyming poetry. Consider this ditty. He saw a carrot and had to grab it. His hunger was like a starving rabbit. It says, to write the second line, the model had to satisfy two constraints at the same time: the need to rhyme with grab it, and the need to make sense. Why did he grab the carrot? Our guess was that Claude was writing word by word without much forethought until the end of the line, where it would make sure to pick the words that rhymed. We therefore expected to see a circuit with parallel paths, one for ensuring the final word made sense, one for ensuring it rhymes. Instead, we found that Claude plans ahead. Before starting the second line, it began thinking of potential on-topic words that would rhyme with grab it. Then, with these plans in mind, it writes a line to end with the planned word. So I also find this really interesting because we always think about, in its simplest terms, that we have a prediction engine, right? And it's predicting the next best word in a sense, which makes us think very like linearly about that. Like, oh, it's just like they said. Even Claude was, or Anthropic was saying, we expected Claude to go like word to word to word to word to word and figure it out at the very last second. And what they're showing here is like, no, that's not exactly what's happening. It's pre-thinking about the words that need to rhyme and pulling that into the second part of the conversation, or the thinking in quotes, if you will. In fact, just to point that out, they put thinking in quotes, which you will often find in AI papers, or if we read stuff from like Ethan Malik or other people. In his book, Co-Intelligence, he talks about that. Like, hey, we're just going to kind of humanize this really quick. I know there's the larger word for it, but I'll bust it. There's no way I'll say it right. And so he's saying like, we're going to say it's thinking. It thinks about this because it's easier to talk in those terms. But you'll even notice here that they're putting thinking in those quotes just to make it known to us that we're not literally saying thinking. It's just the easiest human word to kind of throw on there. So I also found this really interesting, mostly because it was something different than what they expected to happen. And I find that really fascinating that they went in being like, we're pretty sure we know how our model does this. Us, the people who built it, Anthropic. And then they were like, oh no, that's not what it does at all. It does this thing over here. That's pretty amazing. And this goes on, you guys, I'm sure I could talk later in the show, but it goes on to talk about the jailbreaking, things like that. But to your point, Jimmy, I think what's fascinating about this is these are real discoveries. These are, think like biological real discoveries. This is quite literally like inventing a microscope and then tuning it in and looking at a petri dish and going, oh, that's not what we thought was happening at all. It's some microorganism or whatever, or cell division or whatever. You imagine those first times where people had theories, but it was a bit of a black box. My eyes can only see to this level of detail. And now we have this tool that lets us really, really peer into the smallest pieces and parts, and all come to find out it's quite different than where it is. And we still see this with science discovery all the way down to quarks and all sorts of things that still are theories, but have never actually truly been proven because we can't actually see them. So to me, there's a huge correlation here.
Exactly. And that insight, starts making you think, well, if we built it and we thought it would work a certain way, but we crack it open and we realize it's not working that way, it's working a different way, does that mean that the development of intelligence has certain emergent qualities, or inherent qualities might be a better word, that so when you develop intelligence along whatever routes, it manifests or emerges like X, Y, or Z? Because they made it, and when they open it up, it works differently. So, well, how did it get there? How did it get to working differently? Is that just how intelligence develops? Is that how the thinking develops, regardless of your methodology or your source or anything like that? This is what comes up. And that's what leads me back to that thinking of like, well, how does this parallel our own intelligence development and things like that?
And yeah,
I'm gonna
right?
pause real quick. I gotta run. You guys keep it going. I know Andy, by the way, who's hanging out in sort of the background on today's show, has put some stuff in our private chat too, talking about it. So, and then I just wanted to throw this out there. Do we have our announcement today, Beth? Are you going to handle that today?
Yes, I do have an announcement today.
Okay,
Awesome.
don't go
Cool.
anywhere on this show. I got to run, but don't go anywhere because we do have a special announcement that has to do with the show, and we're really excited about it. So that's coming up later. Okay,
All right.
so have a great rest of the show, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks. All right. So, one of the things that I wish was happening with this was that the research labs were open enough that they were willing to share this with each other's models. Because what we've talked about is, oh, we looked in this, we have ownership of this thing. We went in, we looked at it. Hey, it didn't look like what we thought. Can I look in your very, very private, like proprietary secret black box thing? Probably not right now, but is it useful? Would it be great if we could all do that? Would it be better for learning across the board? 100%. And that I think is like the trick of having something that is an emergent intelligence that can function in our world and is getting more functional in our world, that is also a proprietary technology. Like that seems
Well,
like a
yeah, no,
short-term thing.
yeah, you touch on a really important question because it does also it also begs the question of uh, my answer to that is yeah, you should, but we obviously know that the proprietariness of it is that's an inevitability considering the source. And this
Right.
goes back to how technology is ubiquitous, or certain kinds are, because of the source, right? All of the major technology developments that we've had from the United States, anyways, really came from the DARPA program. And that's a
Mhm.
government program. And then it eventually they get to a certain point and then they share it with, private organizations to develop it and for their own purposes and things like that. In this case with AI, we really don't have that, and
Right.
so it wasn't the government that developed the AI, it was these private organizations that really developed the AI, and it's going from there. That's one of the reasons why open source is so important, is because it fulfills that role. It fulfills the
Well,
role of being able to share it out and being able to interact and have lots of eyeballs on it and whatnot. And this could beg the question of, yes, perhaps we should have a more dedicated research arm from the state
right.
to to have a foot in the door or skin in the game, so to speak, so that it isn't just reliant on you know private institutions and
Right.
things like that. Yeah,
And universities used to have that function too. Again,
exactly.
I
Yeah.
suspect with government funding, but right, it used to be a thing, and I suspect it still is in some subjects where the point was when you publish the paper, you publish the directions to do exactly what you did because you want it. You want somebody else to do it, right? Like vet it, yes, so that this becomes not just a one-off, but yes, we've replicated this across the board. And so now we can say that this is a reliable piece of information, which is actually what we call a fact. Because sometimes you get more reliable information after you got like above level of information. I do want to go back to the rhyming thing because I find that hilarious. I talked about it in the chat. What the model is doing is setup and payoff, which is something that we teach in musical improv. It's what rappers do, right? Like it's that process, but it's doing it backwards. Like I'm like, oh no no no, wait, because rabbit is the obvious word, so you should say rabbit in the thing before it so that now you've got your rhyme that's coming on the back end. Or but I guess it doesn't. Like the thing that is in the that is what it's doing is if you have a rhyme that you've set in your head and you know where you're going for the last part, your brain is more likely to give you the rhyme that as you're improvising right in the moment, right? Your brain is more likely to say, I know where you're going, therefore we're going to say that. If you use the rhyme that you've got, your brain works harder to try to scramble to now figure out what that second line is going to end with because you've already used the thing. So that's why, like,
Right.
use the designate, use the payoff rhyme last, and that's how you're setting it up.
Right. And that's a skill,
Yes.
right? That's some may have natural tendencies or talent towards it, but that's a skill to be able to think in that process as opposed to day-to-day conversation,
Right.
right? A lot of times people are trained through their experiences to look for what their responses will be as
Mhm.
opposed to listening for additional input like in a
Right.
conversation, right? So yeah, these are thinking methodologies,
Mhm.
and those things need to be trained. And now can we learn how to it, it still goes back to my original thinking, and that's been swirling in my head is what can we learn to improve ourselves from from this uh emergent thinking process
Mhm.
that we're seeing examples of the oh this is another thinking process. Okay, it came up with it on its own, right? It developed along those paths on its own, and will it be the same for each one? And I think that's kind of where the research goes next. Is like, okay, well, this is haiku.
Right.
What about GPT-4o? Does GPT-4o do the same thing? Some of
Mhm.
the same sources, transformers all you need, same sources, but what's in that black box? Are all of them sort of like this? Or is it model by model? Does it evolve differently depending on how the model methodology is built? So and that's more to reflect upon ourselves. And I don't know who said this, but I got this concept from somewhere where some of the initial like AI development that had occurred, or the reason to do it and research behind it, is so to for humans to better understand themselves, right?
Mm.
And this paper does that for me.
Yeah.
It's cracking open this black box helps me look at how it works in people, or
Right.
how it works in humans. And that for me is going to be the big takeaway. Yes, now I want to see other models. Please do it, even if it's internal, right? Even if you don't share the specifics or as much data as Anthropic has, do it internally and share some basic findings.
Well,
Then, open it up. Yes, please. I would love the research to be more available for sure. But yeah, crack open that egg and let's see how is the yolk formed and things like that.
so we did a show a while back, and we'll find out which flavor of company it was. But the idea was that the it's less of programming and more growing an AI is more like growing an AI than programming an AI. And the analogy that we talked about on the show was that you plant the seed, you give all the foundational information, and you give it an equivalent of a sun and a scaffold, right? Or whatever the garden term for that is. Sorry. Um, and then you leave it to cook. And when you come back, it's grown something, right? So that begs the question, what happens if we increase the light source, change the light source, those sorts of things? And what is that in terms of AI, right? To a certain extent, what people found was that if you just shove more stuff in and give it more time to cook, you're getting better. That's the equivalent of more compute, right? More uh, quadremy zoomabytes of information, right? Like the more that you can give, more gets you more, essentially. But the other things that they're finding is tweaking sometimes gets you more, right? One of the ideas initially was we're treating all of the inputs as equal, right? We're just like shoving the entire internet. Here you go. What would happen if we were able to sort it and only select the really good things that grew in a particular direction, right? So maybe all of that is not equal. These create a better aligned with whatever characteristics you want, right? Like as soon as we start to get more specific and it's not just everything plus this everything, um now we're really getting the piece of how are we intentionally shifting things. And that again is one of the reasons that I really appreciate Anthropic, because this is the first company that I've seen come out and say not only are we thinking about how we might shift things, but we're telling you specifically how. That was the Golden
Mm-hmm.
Gate, Claude, that if we can make it if we can make the concept of Golden Gate magnetic, right? So it's just like everything you can talk about cheesecake for a little while, but at some point it's going to say, best pasty cheesecake is Golden Gate, right?
Right.
Like it's such a magnetic concept. Can you also take that in reverse, and that this is a concept that's in, but we don't want you to go there. So can we anti-magnetize something?
Yeah. And I love that a growing analogy. The concept of, yes, our current methodology for scaling and everything is stuff is much more in there. That's why you're at 400 billion parameters, a trillion parameters, or now with Behemoth from Llama, it's 2 trillion parameters, things like that. And then the tweaking, I would call it pruning, right? Bonsai is, you are pruning and shaping what you want the tree to be. And that's and I guess determining what value is, or what achieving the goal is really important, is so that you can shape it into the way you want. It's just like fruit bearing trees, right? they you We have done right now things to our fruit bearing trees over millennia to make sure that that navel orange is bigger than your hand, right, with the most protective rind, and it'll last on the shelf the longest, and all of these kinds of things, right? And what that analogy, and this is something recent that I've just been doing, like in just my own time, is the concept of permaculture and food forests and things that knowledge and methodologies that we don't use in our current agriculture industry, and how now, and applying that now to this paper, or this thinking behind growing your AI. Are we even just scratching the surface of the various viewpoints, contexts, and methodologies that we can get to or use to develop an AI that's going to produce a certain level of value for us, or what our end goal is, right? So perhaps what we're looking at, this could be why we're seeing reasoning models, because that's alternative to just compute scaling. Evolutionary models like Sakana and things like that. And that methodology is a different way of growing. So if we all call this growing and gardening or farming, right, the biology, the agricultural of AI, what's the AI we want in the end? Do we want to grow a shorter tree that fruits a lot? Do we want a taller tree that provides more shade? Do we want a tree that's going to produce, as part of its lifetime, going to produce better things to reintegrate into the soil? Do we have AI that are developed just so that it can improve later generations of AI, as opposed to an end goal? So I really do like that growing analogy, because it does allow us to explore things that may not necessarily be evident, right? Or, be clear to us, oh, this is the methodology to go down, but allows us to try a bunch of different things. And then this goes to, it's that relationship again, right? AI is just the latest relationship that we're having with whatever process, and growing AI as a concept does then ask the question: is, even though it doesn't look like us or our previous experience, is it unlocking a way to realize our interconnectedness to everything that we touch, experience in this form, or concepts that we don't see? Does this expand our own intelligence, our own appreciation, of reality? Then by, it's a sounding board. It's like,
Right.
oh, we notice these things in us. Oh, okay. Well, how does that work for us?
Right.
We then increase our experience, which then we use to help grow that experience, and back and forth. And it's a symbolic relationship. It's a big cycle back and forth, which is expanding more and more of our understanding of the universe. So I know that's going a bit philosophical, but I think in applied terms, this is a clear, this kind of research helps us explore the near possibilities and try things or think things outside of the box of where we've kind of focused it, right? Like OpenAI is a B2C company now. They are making products for people to use every day to accomplish certain goals. Anthropic is putting out information that allows us to explore or build upon things outside of what our day-to-day experience is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Gwen is saying, growing AI, will it outgrow us like a child? Will it nurture us or see our silliness? There is lots of information coming out. Like if you listen or read the people who are, again, in the rooms, see more of this than we do, they're wondering also and want to start the conversation, which seems not to be happening quite as much as they would like, about yes, when we grow the AI, what are the possibilities that could happen? And I'm sure we'll do a show about it in the coming weeks. But the idea of it is, are we also growing intention? And again, that's really interesting to have this come out of Anthropic, because they have been doing that from the beginning. Can we set intention in what we grow? Can we start from that place of constitutional AI? Everything that happens from this has got to be grown within that container. I think where we get challenged is the places where humans have cognitive dissonance and just don't really deal with it, right? Like we are in lots of situations where, like, wow, if you really believe that, you probably wouldn't have done this that you did, right? And we're able to move through our lives experiencing a certain level of cognitive dissonance. And I'm not sure that AI does that. Like, I think AI is, if you have had some neurodivergent friends, if you're a friend of mine, you've certainly experienced this, right? You all have that friend, like, but it's not though, right? Like, yep, no, we got all that true, but that's not what no, it's not though, right? I feel like AI is kind of like at that place where, like, okay, we need you to be doing what's most probable, right? Or we need you to, like, I need you to be arranging this to come to what's most probable for me or the things that I want. But is AI constitutionally going to be able to not be in alignment without acknowledging that that is a misalignment? And do we want that? Ooh. If you like this, come see the sci-fi show, because we do get very into these concepts. How do we want to wrap up are coming back to this place of the paper.
I'd say it's really good for anyone who joins us later to let's recap what we've covered so far. And again, I will reiterate that this is what we've covered in this episode or today is just a drop in the bucket of how in depth of an analysis we can go with it, right? But essentially, Anthropic has done research on their own model. This is 3.5 haiku. They've cracked open the black box, if you've heard that term in AI, because a lot of AI is and their processes, the thinking process is in a black box, and it's not evident. So but they have a methodology of opening up the black box somewhat, cracking it open a little bit, and following and noticing or observing certain kinds of behaviors when given certain triggers, information queries, and things like that. And so one of the things was context, the association, the method of how words are or queries are broken down. And it also depends on the the goal of the query, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some of the examples they said Texas Capital, and it shows the research shows how all of the points and pads that the AI goes through to get to the answer of Austin and what that context is. So that is a major achievement in AI research. Another one is showing strong evidence to the thinking process, essentially pre planning what the possible answers are or generated based upon the query itself. And this is described through the poetry example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the key or standardized rhyming words, in this case, rabbit, um, and how it relates to other words that could be rhymed with it, or what other words in the line for the poem is related, and things like that. And so between those two main examples, that's how the paper opens up, really talking
Mm-hmm.
about those significant insights. Then it goes into far deeper analysis, and we could probably have a series of episodes just to break down all of these elements and then find out if these things have been explored with other AI and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just to bookend for everybody, these are the main things that we've covered. Then we've kind of explored a little more of the philosophical and thinking and humanity, exploring from that point. Um, for uh, for the next thing, or here's the homework for today, everyone, is take some time to absorb some of the article and ask yourselves a series of questions. Beth, what do you think would be a good question to ask yourself to explore this research a little more?
So I think the idea of playing with what this has to do with why we're thinking something and why AI is thinking something. Like, what does that mean? Because what AI, right now, the AI is an interface for us, right? So we're asking, it's an interface, even if what we're asking for is code, and then we're just going to shove the code to get something that works. Or like Brian was saying, I need a ticket, let's go. It goes and gets a ticket and brings it back. It is essentially in alignment to humans in general and a human in specific, right? Because we're the igniting um we're the igniting idea. We're the cause of the action that it's going to take. At some point that's going to be removed, And right now, like we can automate something so that the cause is I press a button and 5 steps in that fires off a prompt to an AI that gets something back, and then that comes back around. So we already have the capability to be somewhat distant from it, but we are looking at the capability that we could be distant within that black box. And I think that's an important thing to ask. The other
Yeah.
thing that is happening in my mind, and I will leave you with this thought, is if we go back to the rhyme, it is understanding the sound of language that isn't being heard, because it's not reading rabbit as rabbite or rabbet, right? It's rhyming within that concept. And again, neurodivergent AF, right? Like that's just who I am. That seems to me to be a world model. The sound world, it is engaging and understanding that within this sound world, this is rabbit, but not the other pronunciations of that I. And I find that really interesting. The Jan LeCun, like it doesn't understand our physical world. It's not that it doesn't understand any world. It's just hasn't mastered that one because we haven't given it enough patterns to figure it out. Right? Like it's just not that's not the thing. When we give it enough stuff, the patterns, it's like, yeah, no, I totally get that. Anyway, thank you so much. I am gonna drop an invitation link because we would love to continue the conversation with you now or at any time in the future in our public show Slack, the Daily AI Show Community Hub. The link is in the chat. Jen will be there. I will be there, and we hope to see you all there too. And if you're interested in being a part of the more admin part of this, we would love to hear from you. But in the meantime, we have news coming up tomorrow. We're going to talk more about the pace of what is happening with AI and how we're handling that on Thursday. And then Friday, it's all about Google, all the stuff that Google has done that is getting overshadowed. So, anyway, thank you so much. And Jumi, have a good day.
Aloha.